little bit uncomfortable. I felt that I was rushing because I really wanted to finish all the sources I had on my study sheet, which was not the right thing to do. And I talked a lot and gave you very little opportunity to express your own opinions and the way you read the text. So today I will change the pace of the class. I know in advance that we are not going to study all these sources. I will choose those which I find to be the most important, but then please look at the rest because they're all very important. So last week we started the very difficult subject of suffering, or the problem of evil, or the fancy word for it is theodicy, which means justification of God. And I started by saying that the problem we have is that people who believe in God assume three things about God. God is all-powerful, God is all-knowing, and God is all good, all benevolent. If this is the case, how come there is suffering and evil in the world? Because if God is good and God can do anything God wants to do and God knows everything, there shouldn't be evil and suffering. Why there is so much of it, right? So this question occupied people for thousands of years, not only the Jewish people. And last week we limited our discussion to the Bible, which is the core, the foundational source of Judaism. So we started with the main idea that suffering is a form of punishment. God has expectations of us. When we sin, when we break our covenant with God, we are punished. First story in the Torah is about Adam and Eve. God told them, don't eat this fruit, and they ate the fruit, therefore God punished them. So why did Adam and Eve suffer? Because they disobeyed God. Okay, very simple. However, we see that things are not so simple, because sometimes people suffer without having at least any story, any evidence of them sinning or transgressing. So in the Torah, in the Bible, we found few other explanations. One is that sometimes we suffer for sins of others. One version is for the sins of our ancestors, our parents, which sounds cruel, but we know from experience that is true, even unintentionally, right? If you are raised by very problematic parents, if what you see at the house is disrespect and violence, there is a good likelihood that you will continue in the path of your parents. It's not a guarantee, it significantly, though, increases the odds. If you are raised by loving family, very ethical, moral values, again, it's not a guarantee, but very likely you will build a family around these values. Okay, so the Bible applies the same idea and say, yes, sometimes we suffer not for what we do, but for what our ancestors do. In the book of Job, we saw something similar but different and said sometimes we suffer for the sins of our children, which sounds a little bit problematic, but I don't know how many of you grew up in an Orthodox world. I definitely did. And after my bar mitzvah, the second I finished the blessing after the Torah, you're smiling. You know what did my father say? So there is a blessing for the father. Of course, the mothers are in a different space. They are not around there. They're either up there or on the other side of the mechitza. But the father says in Hebrew, Baruch sheptarani מעונשו של זה. Thank you, God, for exempting me from the punishment that I may get because of this person next to me. That's the most literal way I can translate it. No, it's really, I try to be, okay, in other words, what a parent or a father says, and they still do it in a bar mitzvah, is, now my son is 13, thank God I don't have to be punished for his sins. And we all smile, but how many of us have this line about our older kids who say, oh, thank God they are out of our payroll, right? Or at one point, right, my daughter decided to get married. A day after, she will not be on my health insurance. I thought she was kidding. She was not. Okay, but we understand the idea. So still, even in Jewish tradition today, parents are responsible for their acts of their children. And probably even when you look at it legally, you know, my other son had an accident and was not, he was on a bike and he hit a car, or a car hit him. That's a different, but of course they call me. And if there is, if he is guilty, he's not going to write a check to the owners of the car, right? So it makes sense. Okay, so either we are, even if we are good, sometimes we are punished on account of our parents, on account of our children. But there is a strong notion in the Bible that it is related to sin, to transgression. Because why else would we suffer? So before we continue now with the next layer of Jewish text, which normally we refer to as rabbinic text, which starts from the year more or less of 200 with the Mishnah, covers the Talmud, covers the Midrash, and some literature, let's say, of the first millennium, okay? But before that, I want all of you, please, to close your eyes for 20 seconds, not more, and think of an incident of suffering, either personal suffering or you witnessing suffering, and write down one word that comes to mind. You don't have to share the story, okay? But just think about an incident of suffering and write down one word. If anyone would like to share, I'm not forcing ever anyone to speak, but if anyone would like to share. Cancer. Thank you. Empty. Violence. Agony. Pain. Suicide. Death. Pain. Loss. Illness. Pain. Pain. Suffering. Death. Pain. Autism. My word was, oh, Audrey, welcome back. When did you come back? Okay. Helpless. First word that came to my mind is unfair. I don't know, that's the first thing. It's not theologically correct probably, but first thing that came to mind. I just wanted to see what you feel about it. Let's look at our first text. Do you all have the text? So the first text is taken from the Talmud. This one is the Babylonian Talmud. We have two Talmudim, that's the plural. One was written in Babylon, which is Iraq today. The other one was written in Palestine, and those of you who came to my previous class know why I call it Palestine. It's not a political statement. That was the name of the land when the Talmud was written. Which one is more important? The one that was written, and it's called the Palestinian Talmud or the Babylonian Talmud? By far the Babylonian Talmud. People who study Talmud seriously study the Babylonian Talmud. Very few study the one that was written in the land of Israel. Okay? The Babylonian Talmud is much larger. It's more interesting in many ways. Both of them are written mostly in Aramaic, but different Aramaic. There is the Palestinian Aramaic versus the Babylonian Aramaic, which are quite different. Because I studied the Babylonian Talmud, and when I started to study the Palestinian Talmud, or in Hebrew it's called Yerushalmi, even though there was no Jerusalem back then, I was surprised how little Aramaic I understood, because it was so different. And when you think about the geographical distance between Israel and Iraq, is not so big, but different Aramaic. That's just for you to... So when people say Talmud, unless they say the Palestinian or the Jerusalem Talmud, they refer to the Babylonian Talmud, okay? And this is from the very first tractate. The Talmud has 6 tractates. The very first one is Brachot, which means blessings or prayers. So this huge tractate deals with all manners of prayers and blessings. Now, besides law, the Talmud has stories or dialogues, and this is one of them. So let me read. So you see here, Talmud Bavli, Brachot is the tractate, 5a and 5b. 5 is the page number, and one side of the page is A, the other side is B. The Palestinian Talmud has A, B, C, D for a different reason. Okay, so Rabbah, which was one of the Amoraim, one of the rabbis, and some say it was Rabbi Chisda, says, if a man sees that painful sufferings visit him, let him examine his conduct. Okay, so great suffering come to you, what do? Look inside yourself. What did I do wrong? God wouldn't have inflicted me with many of the things that you said unless I did something wrong. So the first thing that we do is self-examining, right? We really examine ourselves, because the notion from the very beginning that we said that there is no suffering without a reason, right? That's what we want to believe. So first look at yourself. For it says, and then there is a verse here, let us search and try our ways and return unto God. Okay. If he examines and finds nothing, you have to be really arrogant to say, no, I really looked deep inside myself and nothing, I'm perfect. But let's say that that's the case, right? You are perfect. You didn't do anything wrong. You cannot think of anything wrong that you did. Okay? Let him attribute it to the neglect of the study of Torah. So you're a perfect person, but still suffers. Why is that? You didn't study Torah? Because the highest value for the rabbis is study Torah. So if you were watching stupid YouTubes on your phone, still being a perfectly honest, ethical, loving person, but wasted your time on Netflix and YouTube and didn't study Torah when you could, well, maybe that's the reason, they said. Okay, and they bring a verse to support it. Let me skip a little bit. Happy is the man who, okay, let him, to the lack of study of Torah. For it said, happy is the man whom thou chastisest. That's, I should have brought some more modern translation of the Torah, and teaches out thy law. If he did attribute it, and still did not find this, okay? Found, oh wow, I didn't do anything wrong, and I studied plenty of Torah. Every second I have, I study Torah, okay? Let him be sure that these are punishments, I like it better, or suffering of love. For it says, for whom the Lord loves, he corrects. So if you didn't do anything wrong, and you didn't waste a second, and you studied Torah, and still, okay, you have pain and cancer and suicide and all these bad things, why is that? It's suffering of love. I said, woo! No, don't. Even some of the rabbis won't like it. But suffering of love, okay? God gives me pain, mental, physical, any kind of pain, as a sign of love. You are all making faces, but I'm going to share with you two things. One is the Mishnah explicitly says, Chosech shivto soneh bno. One who does not use his stick, his staff, or hates his son, which means a father who does not hits his child hates him. Meaning one who does not discipline his child, and discipline, frankly until recently, a little bit of physical actions were not considered to be wrong. I think today is, I believe, a taboo in at least Western societies, but that's a recent thing. Even teachers, and maybe some of you had teachers who had some rulers and some other things, and there are stories in which a little bit of physical pain was considered to be not only legitimate, but actually necessary. Okay? I know it's weird, but so many things shifted dramatically. Okay? But the Mishnah says, yeah. And why? But listen to the wording of the Mishnah. The one who does not physically disciplines his son hates him. Now say it in reverse. If you love your son, you sometimes have to use the stick or the belt or whatever people use to inflict pain on their children. Okay? So inflicting at least some measure of pain is an act of love. That's what was considered in the Mishnah. And before you think that these Jewish old rabbis from 2,000 years ago were crazy, you have to remember the overall environment where they lived. They lived in the Greco-Roman society. And let me read for you something that Seneca, the famous Roman Stoic philosopher, writes. Okay, it was more than 2,000 years ago. Around the time, a little bit before even the Talmudic time that we're talking about, but that's what he writes. I like this quote. Do you not see how differently fathers and mothers indulge your children? How the former urge them to begin their tasks early, will not suffer them to be idle even on holidays, and exercise them till they perspire, and sometimes till they shed tears, while their mothers want to cuddle them in their laps and keep them out of the sun, and never wish them to be vexed or to cry or to work. Okay? So the fathers And there is a good chance that many of us had these kind of fathers. And still, even when we talk about it, it's always the cuddling, the loving mother, even though I see every day the preschool parents, and some of the fathers are much more cuddling today. But the fathers are the disciplinary ones. They are the tough ones, right? Wait until dad comes back from work. Okay? And the mothers are the nice, the soft, the warm. That's what he says, right? But let's continue. That's only the background. And Seneca continues. God bears a fatherly mind toward good men and loves them in a manly spirit. Let them, says he, be exercised by labors, sufferings, and losses, that so they may gather true strength. So Seneca here, not different from the rabbis, and even if they didn't read Seneca, they knew about these ideas. So fathers and mothers both love their children, but the mothers love them differently, right? In a more gentle way. But this is not good enough, he says. The fathers, the tough ones, who push their children to the limit. This is the true love, and this is the kind of love that God shows to whom? Look carefully what he says. To good men. Not just to regular men. To good men. Okay? If you have a child who is 6'11" and super athletic, okay? You want to exercise this guy. You want him to get contract with the Lakers or whoever, because he has the potential. So you want to push him, okay? You don't want him to become a couch potato. Or if you have a child who can do calculus 2 at 6th grade, again, you don't want them to waste their talent. So you push them, okay? If you have a regular child, well, okay, we all have regular children, that's why. But I apply this idea to God. So when God recognizes the potential in someone, really considers them good, he makes them suffer in order to push them even harder. Do you like this idea? I'm not selling you anything. I'm just telling you. But it's interesting and it's important to know. And again, had I taught this class, let's say, even 30 years ago, I think more of the people would say, maybe. 50 years ago, I think, oh yeah. And if you think that today, that's not the case, I don't know if, I hope that parents don't use physical violence against their children. But I know how hard some parents push their kids because they have to go to an Ivy League school. They have to make that team and this team, right? They have to achieve everything that the parents didn't achieve themselves. So they want to live vicariously through their children. So maybe there is no physical violence today, but we see children who get nervous breakdown in high school because of this kind of suffering using this language. Okay, so don't think that it's so far-fetched and it belongs only in the times of the Mishnah or the Romans or until the mid-20th century. Many parents do the same today, and not always for the right reasons. Okay, any comments, any questions, anything? Did the children have breakdowns 30, 50 years ago? I don't really know. I wish I could answer, but I have a feeling, and it's more than a feeling. I have a knowledge not about breakdowns, but the stress that kids have today is significantly greater than it used to be. It's greater because, many of us, I went to school and I did my homework, and then I went downstairs and played with my friends, and once a week I played the piano or something. So many of the children today, their calendars are much heavier than mine. And sometimes it's not even the parents who put the stress. They put the stress on themselves because they want to be ranked whatever it is. They want to have this. Yeah, I just knew that I needed to do well in school. I didn't need to be number one. And if I got a B, it was not the end of the world, because there was not Harvard who would not accept me. So I find it's maybe anecdotal, and maybe it's in this area and some other areas, but yeah, many kids put so much pressure on themselves or the parents. And I just know I've met many kids who collapsed under this stress. I don't know if 30 years ago I know of several kids of the past year who are already alcoholic in high school. And of course, the families, and these are the families, probably didn't, but all this stress and if alcohol, I think it's, that's not the only reason for poor mental health, but this is, okay? And this is the high achievers. These are not, okay, so we established that point, or this idea. They say if you study Torah, if you didn't find any fault in your behavior, it's a punishment or suffering of love. Let's continue, because the Talmud has a tendency. The Talmud is a great book. This is a thing I told you once. My edition of the Talmud has 72 volumes, and each volume is it's huge. So they say something, and then they have a habit to tell you a story that contradicts what they just said. So let's see how it works here in the Talmud. It's so beautiful. So Reb Chia bar Abba fell ill, and Rabbi Yochanan went to visit him. Nice, right? He said to him, Are your sufferings welcome to you? He replied, Neither they nor the reward. He said to him, Give me your hand. He gave him his hand, and he raised him. Okay, so Rabbi Chia went to visit Rabbi Yochanan, who was ill. He asked him, Do you appreciate the suffering? Because what we just learned, if you have no reason, a bad reason, if you're a good person, and Rabbi Chia was really good, and obviously a student of Torah, it must be suffering of love, right? You suffer, it's a proof that God loves you. So he said, Do you like it? And what did Rabbi Chia say to him? Neither they nor the reward. I don't want suffering. I don't care about God's love and all this stuff. Reward can also implies the world to come. If I die, I'll go to heaven. I don't care about that, he said. Get rid of my suffering now. Okay, just the opposite of what we learned. We have to accept this suffering with love. Thank you, God, for cancer, because I can show. No, he said. So Rabbi, he said, Give me your hand, and there was a magic. It was a healer, and he raised him. Okay? Rabbi Yochanan once fell ill, and Rabbi Hanina, okay, it just flipped, went to visit him. He said to him, Are your suffering welcome to you? He replied, Neither they nor their reward. He said to him, Give me your hand. He gave him his hand, and he raised him. Same thing. Why couldn't Rabbi Yochanan raise himself? Because in the previous episode, he raised Rabbi Chia. Why couldn't he raise himself? He's a healer. And I love this phrase. They replied, The prisoner cannot free himself from jail. You can help others, but you cannot help yourself, which is really an important idea here. Okay? Once I gave a sermon, the whole thing, I gave more than one sermon on anti-Semitism, believe it or not, But one of them was that Jews can never fight anti-Semitism on their own. You need a critical mass of non-Jews to fight anti-Semitism for anti-Semitism to be eradicated, right? But it's the same for everything else, right? The black community couldn't help themselves until there was a mass number of non-black people who were fighting with them, okay? Anti-slavery or civil rights or whatever you want. So the notion is that you cannot help yourself. You might be in a position to help others, but you cannot raise yourself. But the beautiful thing here is that when Rabbi Yochanan visited Rabbi Chia, he asked him, probably innocently, aren't you happy with your suffering? And he said, no. And one can think, he was thinking to himself, that's probably wrong. Because if it was me, I would have been happy to be to suffer because of God's love. But when he suffered, I don't want it. Okay, so we have much more tolerance towards somebody else's pain. When it comes to our pain, well, I don't care about the next world, I don't care about suffering, I don't care about God's love, just get rid of this pain. Okay, so you see that despite what the Talmud says, in real life, when the rabbis, and these are two of the greatest rabbis ever, when it came to their personal pain, get rid of it now. Okay? Any comment, anything? Okay, where are we going from here? Let's keep number 2. Let's go to number 3. This is again Babylonian Talmud. This time is Tractate Shabbat. What is the subject of Tractate Shabbat? Shabbat and many other things. Okay, because the beauty of the Talmud is not just the laws, because Tractate Shabbat has the laws of Shabbat, but it has so many other things, including so many stories that have nothing to do with Shabbat, and this is the really good stuff. So page 2, text number 3. Rabbi Ami said, there is no death without sin, and there is no suffering without transgression, and there are no sufferings without iniquity. Okay, very plain. If something bad happens, you deserve it, right? We saw it a million times. That's what Rabbi Ami said. The Gemara, meaning the Talmud, raises an objection from the following Braita. Braita is an earlier text. The ministering angels said before the Holy One, blessed be he, meaning God, master of the universe, why did you penalize Adam, the first man, with the death penalty? Remember, initially, Adam and Eve were supposed to live forever, Garden of Eden. So why did God punish them? And it's not just punish. So God told them, don't eat from the tree, and they ate. But why death penalty? It's not the way we normally think about this story. But this was not normally, it shouldn't be a capital offense to eat a fruit. Even though God said, don't eat the fruit. Okay? It was not an apple. It just, in the medieval times, they started to paint apples and everyone thinks it was an apple. It was just it was a fruit. Okay? We have no idea what kind of a fruit it was. Okay, so I said, they disobeyed God, but still, give them another punishment. Okay, no apples for you for 79 years, but not death. He said to them, I gave him a simple mitzvah, and he violated it. Oh well, God is tough. They said to him, didn't Moses and Aaron, who observed the whole Torah in its entirety, nevertheless die? The Holy One said, blessed be he, said to them, citing the verse, all things come alike to all. There is one event to the righteous and to the wicked, to the good and to the clean, and to the unclean, to him who sacrifices and to him who does not sacrifice, as is the good, so is the sinner, and he who swears as he who fears an oath. It's a quote, but what is God saying? Can you say it again? Everyone dies, but he says more. So Adam sinned, he ate of the tree, and God, but then they ask, why Moses and Aaron? They observed the entire Torah. Okay? And God said, with those, there are very special people for whom I have different criteria. I treat them differently. So even though they do something tiny, their punishment will be the greatest. Okay? Just the opposite of our life today, all over the world, not only in America. The higher, the more important you are, the less you pay for your crimes. No, it's not a joke. It's not a joke. Actually, the weekly portion deals with it. According to the Torah, the greater you are, the greater the punishment should be. Okay, so Moses and Aaron were on such a high level that even the tiniest thing, when God told them, talk to the rock, and they hit the rock, that's enough. Okay? So it's just, our reality is completely different than the standards of the Torah. So that's, okay. We can continue. The Gemara answers, Rav Ami stated his position in accordance with the time. You know, I really want to go to the next one. So, any comments about the text that we just read? So, everyone suffers, but the better you are, the higher you are on the ladder of observance, of closeness to God, the more you will suffer. Because I think the whole system is messed up. And the system is rigged today to benefit those with more power. Power, money, it's the whole thing. It can be political power and money, and we know how it works. You don't need to come to a Talmud class to know how things work today. Okay? But we do know that when regular people commit a certain crime versus super powerful people, here and there we'll have a token powerful person who pays the full price. You know, just go back many years ago, 2008, when the market collapsed, Lehman Brothers, how many of them are in jail? Okay, nobody. Okay, bail out the whole thing. When regular people do a fraction of that, they spend a lot of time in prison. But that's a different kind of a discussion.
So if somebody is held to a higher standard because they're less sinful than others, and their violation is punished at greater. I don't know, the word is philosophically confusing to me because I did learn that. So you have this rabbi who's the greatest, and he suffers so much because his infraction is tiny, but he's got this higher standard. Why would anybody aspire to be to that higher standard? For two reasons. One, they know they're going to suffer more because they know they can't be perfect because they're not God. Or two, that there's some arrogance, which is also a sin.
So let's tackle the first one. So Estelle was asking a very logical or philosophically logical question. If this is the case, when God has higher standards to people who are better, who are higher on the level of observance and everything else, why bother? Just be a mediocre person and God will treat you with much more tolerance, right? I have two brothers, younger brothers. I'm the oldest, and I was a good student. I was one of the people who studied hard, and it was really important to me. My middle brother was not so much into studying, but the youngest has a potential greater than all of us together. And he did exactly what you said, because my parents held me to much higher standards. The little one, this really smart one, said, I'll just be a B student, because they'll just be happy when I get a B and I don't get a D. So I simplified, but that's really the way he was thinking. Because he looked at me and said, no, they always wanted me to do better. And with him, well, you're better than the middle one, but that's exactly the way he was thinking. And you can say, no, that's why I think we have a major leadership problem, and some, people don't want to be at top of the pyramid sometimes. It's much harder, it's much more dangerous. The fall can crush you completely. And but logically you're right, that should not be, the whole story here is also based on one of the most tragic stories in the Torah, in which the two children of Aaron, Nadav and Abihu, sacrificed what the Torah calls a foreign fire. It was a big celebration, the inauguration of the tabernacle in the desert, and part of it was offering some animals, and they did it incorrectly. What happened? Fire came from heaven and killed them. God zapped them. The entire community gathered together to celebrate the inauguration of the tabernacle. It was huge. And God killed them. And Moses actually asked God, why? I mean, let's assume they made a mistake. They did make a mistake. We don't even know what the mistake was, but why? And God says, Bekovaya Kadesh, those who are the closest to me, I have different standards. So even the tiniest mistake. Now, if you believe in heaven and hell, it's much easier. Because the reason that you're punished in this world so severely is that you'll have perfect life in the next world. Okay? So what God is doing makes you pay for whatever you did, because your eternal life will be perfect. Okay, so if our life here is so limited, it's always very limited and always too short, next life is unlimited. So it's better to be punished now for perfect life through eternity. So those who believe in this system get it, okay? This is one of the explanations too that we'll look more at next week when we look at the modern scholars and especially post-Holocaust philosophers who dealt with it. But the idea was, just pay now. And let's read the next one, because this is such a beautiful story here. Number 4 on page 3. When Moses ascended on high, he found the Holy One, blessed be he, tying crowns on the letters of the Torah. Have you seen a Torah scroll? It doesn't have vowels, it doesn't have dots, but some of the letters has these little decorations on top of them. These little things. These are the crowns. So Moses asked God, Master of the universe, for whom are you doing this? Why bother? Why do you need these fancy decorated letters? Just put the letters as they are. I mean, he said to him, he is God. There is a man who is destined to arise after many generations, and Akiva ben Joseph his name, who is destined to expound upon each and every, I guess it's dot, and title of the letters. Said many generations from now, like 1200 years from now, more or less, there will be an amazing scholar, Akiva. Okay, this is Rabbi Akiva, and he will be so smart that not only the written word of the Torah will be important to him, but all these little tiny decorations above the letters that nobody understands the meaning, he will. And he'll be able to learn, to expound tons of ideas only from these little things. Moses said to him, to God, Master of the universe, show him to me. I want to see him. And Moses is with God, so time traveling was not a problem. He said to him, no, really, that's exactly what it is. He said to him, turn around. Moses went and sent behind 8 rows of Rabbi Akiva's students. Okay, so God said, just turn around, and Moses found himself 1200 years in the future, sitting in the study hall of Rabbi Akiva. And he was sitting behind 8 rows. This is important. Why do you think it's important that he was behind 8 rows? Because back then the good students sat in the front. He was sitting in the nosebleeders. So Moses himself, who got the Torah, was placed at the end. Why? Because he was not so smart in comparison to, bring Isaac Newton today, send him to MIT. I mean, he was really smart, but I don't think he'll understand a word of what they're saying there, right? Probably even Albert Einstein will not understand AI and many of the things today. So think about poor Moses, 1200 years into the future. Woo. Okay, but he was sitting there. Okay, he did not understand what they were saying. His strength weakened. Okay, he felt humiliated. I'm the worst student in the class. I used to be the smartest. I got the Torah directly from God, and all these students are so much smarter and knowledgeable than me. When Rabbi Akiva reached the discussion of Menachot, which is one of the more esoteric tractates, he expounded upon one matter in accordance with halacha, with the Jewish law. His students said to him, my teacher, from where do you know this? He said to them, it is halacha transmitted to Moses from Sinai. Moses' mind was put at ease. So they asked Rabbi Akiva, how do you know that this is the law, this is the halacha? He said, I have no logical explanation, but we have a tradition that goes back to Moses. So Moses got some credit, his name was mentioned, he got a little mention in the footnotes, he felt good again. There is still some use for him, okay? So logically, and in terms of logic, in terms of knowledge, he was the worst student, but still, he was Moses, okay? Maybe the idea that the example of Isaac Newton was not so bad. Right? Maybe Isaac Newton cannot understand string theory today, but we still have a lot of respect to him, and we still use his theories today, at least as the foundations of physics, right? Okay, this is not the story. This is just the beginning of the story, not the reason that I included it. Moses returned before the Holy One, blessed be he, and said to him, Master of the universe, you have one such righteous man, and you're showing this to me? Meaning you're giving me the Torah when you have this super genius Akiva? I'm just a schlepper in comparison to him. Give the Torah through Akiva, not me. He said to him, be silent. Such is my decree. So what was God's response to Moses, who said, why don't you give the Torah to Akiva? Be silent. None of your business. That's me. I'm God. Okay? Okay. If you wish, I will tell you his reward. Okay, Rabbi Akiva, the best students, let's see his reward. Moses said to him, show me his reward. He said to him, turn around. Moses turned around and saw his, Rabbi Akiva's flesh being weighed in the butcher shop stalls, i.e. Rabbi Akiva's martyrdom, right? He was executed by the Romans and they sold his flesh, probably as food for animals. That was his destiny. With all his Torah knowledge and all this stuff, that was his reward. Moses said to him, Master of the universe, this is Torah and this is his reward? You just showed me that Rabbi Akiva was the most learning, the smartest, the best rabbi ever, and that's how he ends his life? Like food for dogs? And we have the whole description in the Talmud, in Tractate Gittin, of it's so gory and so cruel what happened to Akiva. He said to him, meaning God said to him, be silent, shut up. Such is my decree. You have no license to question my judgment. When it comes to the question of suffering, according to this story, as close as Moses was to God, even Moses cannot understand. Even Rabbi Akiva cannot understand. So if any of us in this room, I think that's a message, tries to question suffering, the answer is, be silent. Who do you think you are? If Moses was not allowed to get this knowledge, this information of the answer to the question of suffering and evil, if Rabbi Akiva wasn't, so none of us can. Now, this is again, none of these stories give us the official answer. These are just different attempts by the rabbis to give different answers. And you see how different they are from each other. And we are going to conclude with my favorite one, completely different kind of an answer. But before we read the last one on page 4, number 6, is there anyone who wants to say something, ask a question? Audrey?
Men sitting around, terrified of losing their power, their control, and the message, I mean, they don't know anything, they're just stories here. They know they're making up stories, they're presenting it as if it's the word of God. And at the end of the day, it's their real message is, shut up, this is what I'm telling you to do, and you have the right to question me. And it's really disturbing to me just because of, the legacy of Judaism has done. It also makes me really sad in terms of how far from that now. And I'm struggling to sort of find holiness in this, and I feel like I'm either really missing something that maybe you're helping find, or I just think it's the way it is.
So this is a really good point. That's why I divided the class to 3 sections from the Torah to today. And next week, we're going to touch much more on the question that you asked, because the way you put it, this is the way we struggle, especially after the Holocaust, because all the answers that we are getting are not good enough to explain the murder of 6 million. Okay? And so we'll see how the theology changed. But just remember, this is just one story that you are disturbed by. I look at it a little differently. For me, the rabbis needed a lot of courage. And they're very honest here by saying to themselves, you really don't know. Next week, if we'll have some time, I'll compare the Jewish way to Islam, for example. Just asking this question is a sin. You cannot ask. These rabbis have been asking all the time. They've been challenging God. Moses is challenging God here. He says, this is Torah and this is its reward? Okay, so Moses, they put Moses, the most important Jew ever, as their spokesperson who says what you said. I don't get it. I'm not buying it. So God said, shut up. But this is not the end of the discussion. Are you satisfied with God's answer? I don't think that any of the readers who read it, even 1,500 years ago, were satisfied. This is too easy. I think what they're saying here now, we're not happy. The story's not over. So they didn't know what to do, or they chose to end it here. But all the readers today and back then, well, that's too easy for God. We need more. Just to say, shut up. I mean, it doesn't even work with dogs anymore, so let alone, no, really. I mean, your kid wants something and you said, no, shut up, this is my decision. Good luck with that. Let's read the next one that will even shed more light on it. Ready? The very last one. When Rav Yosef, this is from the tractate of Chagiga, another tractate from the Babylonian Talmud that deals with, any idea what Chagiga is? What is Chag? Holiday. Okay, so you say Chag Sameach, happy holiday, and it's from the root of Chagiga is, sorry? In modern Hebrew, it's celebration. It can even be a party. Okay, but here it's the reference is for celebrating holidays. When Rav Yosef reached this verse, he said, what is the verse? I forgot to give you a tiny bit of a background. So before that, there is a whole discussion about rabbis who quote verses that make them cry. So it was sort of a game. Who can bring a verse from the Bible that you struggle with, that you really want to cry, that upsets you so much? Okay, so this is the backdrop against which this passage was written. So when Rabbi Yosef reached this verse, he cried. What is the verse? But there are those swept away without justice. Okay, it's a line from Proverb. What does it mean? There are those who suffer without a reason, without a trial, without anything, just things happen, okay? And for Rabbi Yosef, he cried, he said, it really shatters my entire foundation of belief in God. I want to know that my actions or everyone's actions have consequences, that there is justice in the world. So what does it mean, this verse? There are those who swept away without justice, okay? It's not working for me. He said, is the one who goes before his time and dies for no reason? The Gemara answers, the Talmud answers, yes. Like this incident of Rav Bevai bar Abaye, who would be frequented by the company of the angel of death and would see how people died at the hand of this angel. Okay, so this Rabbi Bevai, the son of Abaye, was a good buddy with the angel of death. Okay, the Talmud sometimes has some esoteric stories. They met Elijah the prophet, they met some angels, and this rabbi was close with the angel of death, who sometimes took him to work, showed him how things work. Okay? Again, they know that they're not describing reality, they're making a point here. Okay, so he was close with the angel of death, and he showed him how it worked. The angel of death said to his agent, go and bring me, meaning kill, Miriam the razor. So I didn't know until I studied that passage that the angel of death has helpers. Okay, so if you thought that he does all the work in the world, no, he has a whole platoon of assistants who do the work for him. He said, go and get me Miriam the razor, i.e. the braider of women's hair. Okay, the word in Hebrew is the same word of, basically hairdresser, because she was able to raise the hair, to give a nice volume to the haircut, something like that. So they used it yes, you're touching to see if you can use the services of this Miriam, the hairdresser. I want Miriam, the hairdresser. But the Hebrew phrase goes with the word razor of hair. Try to make sense of it, but that's... He went and instead brought him Miriam, the raiser of babies. So instead of razor of hair, raiser of babies, the nanny or the preschool teacher, right? Still, Miriam, the Hebrew is very similar, the razor, okay? The megadela, the one either the grows or the hair or raises the children, but so the agent, the minion, the proxy of the angel of death made a mistake and brought the wrong Miriam. Already, you have to ask the question, what? I mean, these are angels. They're not supposed to make mistakes. We make mistakes, but they are not in a position to make mistakes. But since they're angels, what do you think they can do or they should do? Reverse it. I mean, it's nice to be an angel, right? If you make a mistake, you can reverse it. The angel of death said to him, I told you to bring Miriam, the raiser of women's hair. His agent said to him, if so, return her to life. Yeah, you're the angel of death. You can bring people to life. You can resurrect. Resurrection was something that people believed in. And there are so many stories in the Talmud. I'm not even talking about the New Testament. I'm talking about the Talmud and even the Bible itself. Tons of stories about resurrection. Elijah and Elisha, they know how to resurrect. Okay, let alone an angel, right? The angel of death, okay, sorry, made a mistake. I mean, just help me to fix it. No big deal. He said to him, since you have already brought her, let her be counted toward the number of deceased people. It's unbelievable. You have quota, right? It seems like the angel of death has a quota. He says, since you already killed her, well, let her, put her on the side. I don't know if it's true or not, or the police officers, by the end of the month, they say, are much more diligent because they need to raise X amount of money from tickets, right? So don't speed at the end. I don't know if it's true or not. I really have no clue, but you know, sometimes we have quotas, and okay, so you took the wrong one, no big deal. At least counter towards the quota of the month. Which, again, it's mind-boggling. We're talking about human life, right? You're talking about you were distressed before. Okay, so the number of deceased people. Apparently, this woman died unintentionally. Just if you thought you didn't understand, they say it explicitly. She did nothing wrong. It was a mistake of the helper of the angel of death. Rav Bivai asked the agent, but as her time to die had not yet arrived, how were you able to kill her? There must be a system, right? You cannot just kill people, take their lives. It's God, it's the angel. Her time was not up. How could you do it even? Technically, we probably think there must be a system, a built-in system that prevents mistakes. We would have assumed that, right? The agent responded that he had the opportunity, as she was holding a shovel in her hand, and with it, she was lightening and sweeping the oven. Ooh, she was doing something dangerous. She was cleaning the oven. She took the fire and set it on her foot. She was scalded and her luck suffered, which gave me the opportunity, and I brought her. Basically, she said she had an accident. And that gave me the opportunity, so I took her. It could have gone the other way around, should have gone the other way around. She should have healed from the coal or from the burn. But yeah, well, since she was already vulnerable, and I decided I had the opportunity, I took her. Rav Bivai, Bar Abaye, said to the angel of death, do you have the right to act in this manner, to take someone before his time? Right? He's incredulous, just like we are. How can he do it? We understand you work for God, the angel of death, but the entire Talmud and the Torah says that there is a system, right? You did something wrong, you didn't study Torah, but just because of a stupid mistake of the assistant of the angel of death, the angel of death said to him, and it is not written, but there are those swept away without justice. So it brings us back to the verse from Proverbs. Rav Bivai said to him, and isn't it written, one generation passes away and another generation comes? He said, well, mistakes are made. Okay? And this is the Talmud. Okay? What are they saying here? It's not very nice language, but I think in Pulp Fiction they said it the best. Poop happens. But that's exactly what he says here. But it's not the rabbi said. This is basically the angel of death, the angel who works for God. He said, yeah, there is a system, but sometimes things don't work out according to the system. So tough, learn to live with it. I curated that, okay? This is not all that the Talmud says about it. I chose the more provocative text because they're more interesting and less predictable. I don't think that any of you expected a story like that to come from the Talmud, right? So this is not representative of the discussions of rabbinic Judaism of the question of evil and suffering. But I chose mostly the texts that show us how problematic it is. And when some rabbis try to give us simplistic answers, like there is no suffering without a sin, we say, no. When they came up with the idea of suffering of love, immediately they had a story of these two great rabbis. I don't need the love, but I don't want the suffering. Forget about it. When they try to say, but yeah, God has a system, just trust in God, right? God knows. And here we see a story that, whoops, even God's organization up there messes up. And sometimes we have to live with it. Is it helping us? I don't know. But this is where we are stopping today, let's say in the 6th century CE, like 1400 years ago. What we're going to do the next week is even harder in some ways because we are the audience because the audience of the rabbis were people who lived 1500 years ago. A lot of the texts that I will bring are for us today. How can we deal with some of the pogroms and certainly the Holocaust, especially people who don't buy it, who don't think that if we suffer, it means that God loves us, okay? We need more than that. And I will bring some suggestions, and at the end, maybe one of them or more than one will satisfy you, or maybe you will leave the class more frustrated than you started. After that class, I'm going to teach a different one. I'm going to take 3 weeks of comparative religion. Because so many times I said, oh, one day I'm not going to do it systematically, like starting with the whole doctrine of Judaism, but I'm going to talk about Judaism in comparison to Islam, Christianity, and Buddhism, but it will be from a Jewish point of view, because that's what I know, okay? No, I know a lot about Christianity, Islam, and Buddhism. I'm not an expert the way I want to think I am when it comes to Judaism, okay? So this will be my perspective. So if there is an hour of a class, I'm not going to do 15 minutes. I'm going to say, that's Judaism, and now see how Islam, Christianity, So the first class it will be more generic, and then we'll take some issues which are fascinating. For example, the idea of, we will look a little bit at suffering next week, but the Messiah, sexuality, the right kind of life, etc. But next week we're going to finish with suffering, if we didn't have enough of it. But that will be the modern, the contemporary theologian and philosophers with an emphasis on the post-Holocaust theology. Any comments?
Last week, we talked about God made mistakes with Noah.
Mm-hmm.
And this is now the angel, angel made mistakes. Are these the only two examples?
No.
Lots of them.
Yes, that's when you read it depends where you read the Bible, the Jewish Bible, right? The Christian Bible, the New Testament, Jesus is perfect. Doesn't do anything. He's perfect. The Bible is different. There is no one character in the Bible, from Abraham or Adam and Eve and Noah, who didn't mess up, including God. Okay, and God messes up a lot. And it's written like that because it's easier to relate to a God who makes mistakes on a personal level, especially when we compare in the stories that God is a parent figure than to a perfect figure. Okay? So yeah, there are many more examples. But this is the story that we just read is different in a deeper way. You don't like it? Why don't you like it?
God making mistakes is like a very foreign concept. I've always thought God is.
And that's how we start every class. If God is perfect, meaning omnipotent, ultimate, unlimited power, omniscient, unlimited, ultimate knowledge, and all good, omnibenevolent, why is there cancer? Okay? No, this is always the question we have to keep in the background. Why is there cancer? Okay, so that's why we have to struggle with it. And one of the answers is that maybe God is not so perfect, at least in one of these answers. Or you can go to the story that Audrey got upset about when God said, shut up. And we saw it at the book of Job last week, if you remember, when God talked to Job and said, why did you do it to me? And we started the book reading that Job was perfect, didn't sin, didn't do anything. And God said, who do you think you are? Where were you when I created the world? My system is so complex that a mortal being has no capacity to understand. So I am perfect. Many people will say the same. God is perfect. Again, we'll look at Islam. Yes, God is great. God is perfect. And I was brought up also to think, if I don't understand something, must be my limitations, never God. But it did shift in the Holocaust. And we'll talk about free will and some other things, because to hold this truth, and really be honest with yourself, after the Holocaust was not easy to many people who held this belief before the Holocaust. Okay, so yeah, you can explain away some tragedy, some things happen, but that was something of on such a different scale that it pushed people to question these beliefs that God is all perfect. Now, I'm not saying that God is perfect or not perfect. That's really a matter of belief. What I'm saying is that in Judaism, a big part of it is the ability and sometimes encouragement to question God. And God sometimes is happy and very proud when we question God, and sometimes God tells us, shut up. I hope to see you next week. Thank you.